The city buzzed with morning rush, heels clicking on pavement, coffee cups in hand, phones glued to ears. Among them, in a quiet corner of a welding workshop, tucked behind a row of auto shops, a girl in oversized overalls tightened her gloves and struck the first spark of the day. Her name was Mylin. And unlike most girls in this part of town, she wasn't worried about makeup, brand names, or catching a CEO's eye. She had no time for that. She was too busy helping her elderly neighbor weld a broken steel chair, covered in dust and sweat, but with a spark of quiet pride in her eyes. She didn't know that just a few blocks away, someone had noticed her. Li Ziyuan, the cold and famously unapproachable CEO of Ziyuan Corp, sat in the back seat of his black SUV, tapping away on his phone as his car crawled through traffic. Known throughout the city for his ruthless business tactics and his distaste for anything fragile, he had built his empire on logic, power, and precision. Delicate girls with high heels and polished nails were a common sight around him, but they bored him. He called them ornaments. Beautiful, but useless. He'd long made it clear to his staff and to his matchmaking-obsessed grandmother that he had no patience for girls who screamed at bugs, refused to walk in the rain, or cried over broken nails. And yet, that morning, something, or someone, interrupted that rhythm. Ziyuan glanced up from his screen, just for a moment, annoyed by a strange orange flicker outside his window. He was about to ignore it, but something made him look again. There she was. A girl with a welding helmet, crouched beside an elderly man, guiding his hand with patience and skill. Sparks flying between them. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't delicate, but it was different. He didn't say anything to his driver, just stared a second longer, brows furrowed. Maylin didn't see him. She was too focused on the old Mr. Wang, whose eyesight was fading, but who refused to stop working. She had been helping him for free every morning before going to her part-time job at a local noodle stall. Her life was simple: pay the rent, keep her sick younger brother in school, and never ask for more than she needed. Her hands were rough from work, but her heart was steady. People often said she was why? Too poor to be noticed, too ordinary to matter, until that morning. Later that day, back at the towering Ziyuan Corp headquarters, Ziyuan sat at his desk, flipping through reports. But the image of that girl wouldn't leave his mind. He didn't even know why. Maybe it was the way she didn't flinch when a spark flew. Maybe it was how she smiled at the old man, as if he were her own grandfather. Either way, something stirred, something unfamiliar. He brushed it off. She's just a street girl, he muttered to himself. Probably some local mechanic's assistant, but fate had already decided otherwise. The next time they crossed paths wasn't on the street. It was at a company event, of all places. Maylin had been hired as a temp staff member to serve water and clean the floors for a Ziyuan Corp-sponsored charity gala. She wore a plain white shirt and black trousers, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She looked nothing like the elegant guests swirling around in diamonds and designer gowns. Ziyuan barely glanced at the servers, until one of them accidentally bumped into a chair, spilling water on a wealthy investor's coat. The investor barked, furious, already threatening to call security. But instead of panicking, Maylin apologized softly and pulled out a clean napkin, dabbing carefully, calmly. "I'm really sorry, sir," she said. "I'll cover the cleaning costs myself." That voice. Ziyuan looked up. He recognized her instantly. the girl from the welding shop. Something about her presence, unapologetically real, cut through the fake smiles of the ballroom like a blade. She wasn't begging for attention. She didn't care about status. She was just doing her job. No airs, no act. For the first time in years, Lee Ziyuan couldn't look away from a girl. And for the first time in years, his expression wasn't cold. But the world around them didn't pause. The investor sneered, brushing her hand off, muttering something about dirty hands and useless servers. Ziyuan's jaw tightened, but before he could say anything, Maylin simply bowed and walked away, quietly, gracefully, as if the insult didn't touch her at all. It did, but she didn't let it show. That night, Ziyuan found himself scrolling through his company's internal roster, searching. He didn't know her name. He didn't even know why he wanted to know, but his fingers didn't stop until he found it. Maylin, age 22, part-time cleaner, low income, no family background, nothing notable, except a single note from HR. Often takes early shifts to help elderly vendor across the street. His hand froze on the mouse. Who was this girl? Why did she feel like the first real thing he'd seen in years? But the story wasn't going to let him figure it out easily. The next morning, Maylin didn't show up for work. Rumors swirled. Someone had followed her on the way home, and she had disappeared. Her phone was off. Her landlord hadn't seen her since last night. And the last CCTV footage showed her turning into a narrow alley behind the market. And just like that, the girl he didn't even realize he was chasing was gone. Ziyuan stood at the edge of his office window, phone in hand, heart pounding for a reason he couldn't name. Because sometimes, the person you swore you'd never fall for disappears before you get a chance to realize you already have. The air felt heavier the day after Maylin vanished. Lee Ziyuan stood in his glass-walled office, staring blankly at the city skyline. He had a meeting in 5 minutes, a deal worth billions hanging in the balance. But all he could think about was that girl in the welding shop, the same girl who quietly bowed and left the ballroom after being insulted. Her absence gnawed at him in a way that made no sense. He didn't know her. He had no reason to care. And yet, he did. He picked up his phone. Get me all CCTV footage near West Lane Market from last night, now. The search began quietly. Ziyuan didn't want anyone knowing. Not the media, not his assistant, not even his grandmother, who would surely mistake this for a romantic interest. And he didn't even know if that's what it was. All he knew was someone had hurt her, and he needed to find her. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Maylin Yan sat quietly in an old warehouse. Her wrists ached from the zip ties, her knees bruised from being shoved around. The man pacing in front of her was someone she never expected to see again. Zhao Peng, a failed investor who had been blacklisted by Ziyuan Corp 2 years ago for embezzlement. He had lost everything after Ziyuan testified in court, and now he wanted revenge. You think he'll come for you? Zhao Peng sneered, circling her. You're nobody. A cleaner, a welder girl. Why would Lee Ziyuan risk his empire for someone like you? Maylin didn't answer. She wasn't sure herself, but something in her gut whispered that Ziyuan would come. Not because he was in love with her. No, it wasn't that kind of story. Not yet, but because she had seen a flicker of something in his eyes that night. A recognition. A flicker of respect. Or guilt. Or something deeper. Unspoken. As hours passed, memories filled her mind. How hard life had been since her parents died. How she juggled 3 jobs to raise her little brother. How she never asked for help, never begged. Even now, Tied up and unsure of what tomorrow would bring, she refused to cry. She had survived worse. At the same time, Xiuan's search uncovered a trail. A shaky alley camera caught Mei Lin being pulled into a van. The plate was fake, but a faint logo on the back, Jihua Logistics, was visible. That was enough. Xiuan didn't wait for the police. He called Qin Luo, a former military friend turned private investigator, and they hit the road. Every minute counted. While they hunted, a different drama unfolded inside Xiuan's company. A high-level manager, He Yanyan, who had long resented Xiuan's leadership, started leaking news to the media about the CEO's strange behavior. Rumors spread that he had fallen for a street girl, lost his mind, abandoned his duties. Stocks began to wobble, shareholders whispered, and Xiuan, unaware, was stepping deeper into the shadows of a trap, meant not just for Mei Lin, but for him too. Back in the warehouse, Zhao Peng's plan changed. "You know," he muttered, lighting a cigarette. "If I kill you now, it'll barely make a dent. But if I live stream your final moments, if I show him what happens when you cross Zhao Peng," Mei Lin's heartbeat spiked. She tugged at the zip ties, eyes scanning the room for anything she could use. Any sharp edge, any tool, anything. Then just as the tension peaked, the old iron door creaked. Footsteps. Fast. Firm. Zhao Peng turned, grabbing a metal pipe. "Who's there?" The next few seconds blurred. A shadow moved fast. Qin Luo. A flash of fists. Metal clanged on concrete. A scream. A gunshot. Mei Lin ducked instinctively. Then another voice. Deeper. Commanding. "Mei Lin!" She looked up. Li Xiuan stood in the doorway. He looked nothing like the polished CEO on TV. His shirt was torn, his face smudged with dirt and sweat, but his eyes, sharp and focused, locked onto hers. "I told you someone would come," she whispered, half laughing, half crying. But the danger wasn't over yet. Zhao Peng, bloody but still conscious, pulled a switch. "A timer! Too late!" He spat. "The place is rigged. Let's all go down together." Xiuan grabbed Mei Lin, pulling her up. "Run!" They dashed through the warehouse, past broken crates and exposed wires, heartbeats thudding in sync. Behind them, the timer beeped faster and faster. Mei Lin's leg gave out, her earlier bruise turning into a sharp pain. But she didn't stop. Xiuan pulled her along, holding tighter as the world around them pulsed with danger. Just as they burst through the back exit, an explosion lit up the night sky. The screen faded to black, and the audience, breath held, would have only one question. Did they survive? Thick smoke filled the night as the warehouse crumbled behind them. The blast had knocked them both off their feet. Mei Lin lay on the grass, dazed but conscious, while Xiuan's arm shielded her. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police, fire trucks, maybe even media vans, already circling like vultures. He coughed hard, helping her sit up, brushing soot from her face with shaking hands. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded slowly. "You came." He didn't say anything, just looked at her for a long second. That look said more than any words ever could. This wasn't about guilt anymore. It wasn't charity. Somewhere along the way, something real had started to grow. Fragile but strong. They had both fought for survival, but now they were standing for each other. Police surrounded them quickly. Zhao Peng had survived the blast, but was found unconscious. He was taken into custody, along with enough evidence to link him to multiple crimes, including past financial fraud. With him out of the picture, the shadows over Mei Lin's life started to lift. Back at the hospital, Mei Lin's younger brother rushed to her room, crying into her shoulder. She held him close, smiling through tears. Ziwan watched from the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, but when she looked up and smiled at him, it felt like home, simple, honest. Nothing grand, just something real, and that was enough. Meanwhile, chaos brewed at Z1 Corp. The rumors, the leaked footage, and Z1's sudden disappearance had pushed the board to the edge. He Yanyan made her move, calling for his removal. But before the final vote, Z1 walked into the boardroom with Chin Luo and a flash drive, proof of He Yanyan's involvement in leaking confidential documents and manipulating media stories. She was escorted out within the hour. The company stabilized, but Z1 had changed. He no longer hid behind cold strategies and power suits. He now understood the value of people over profits, trust over control. The world watched in surprise as he announced the company's newest project: affordable tech housing for low-income families. Designed in part by a former welder-turned-designer, Mei Lin. She didn't need saving. She only needed someone to believe in her. And that belief had started a chain reaction that neither of them could have imagined. Their love didn't explode into fairy tales or headlines. It grew slowly. Late-night talks, quiet walks, healing moments between two people who had been broken in different ways. Mei Lin opened her own welding and design studio. Ziwan, despite all his wealth, found joy in helping her build it from the ground up, literally painting walls and fixing shelves like any other guy in love. Their story, once tangled in power, danger, and misunderstanding, became something soft and human, not because they had no more problems, but because they chose to face them together. And in the end, that was the real story. Not just a CEO and a girl from the factory, but two souls who survived the blast, the betrayal, and the fear, and still chose each other. Because sometimes, love doesn't need fireworks to be unforgettable. Sometimes, it just needs someone to stay when the smoke clears.